The Transparent Teacher by Walter Bowne. Standing naked before the universal being. I never knew a story from 1988 would one day get me in trouble in 2023. Would I really bear all for education? An entry from my 200-page travel journal, composed at 19, was later edited and updated for publication. For 25 years as an English teacher, I've been telling this tale to my students. It exemplifies what Ralph Waldo Emerson calls the, quote, transparent eyeball. That transcendental moment when one feels connected to nature and, well, the universe. Because transcendentalism can be esoteric, I demonstrate saying, hey everyone, I have a story to tell you. And I recount hiking with my brother in the Black Hills of South Dakota to Harney's Peak, now called Black Elk Peak. Once there, alone at the summit in this abandoned fire tower, I experienced a sense of wonder and connection to something greater, a spiritual moment. In that solitude, the majesty overcoming me, I spontaneously removed my clothes, keeping only my socks and shoes, immersed in that moment. I recite Emerson, standing on a desk, from memory and faith, standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing, I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God. Students laughed at the awkwardness. Like, who wants to picture that, right? Admittedly, it's creepy, especially out of context. You mean even within the text, it's not that creepy? Okay, yeah. Yes, the moment of spontaneous energy between lesson and learner in an organic and dynamic class that works as currents in the water. It's risky, though. And the best teachers are tightrope walkers across the Niagara. However, the lesson made an impact. Former students, much older now, approach me in public or reach out through social media saying, hey, Bowne, man, that lesson stayed with me, about being connected to nature and about how we matter despite being specks in the universe. The story resonated because of its, I guess, authenticity. I teach through stories that leave an impression, human to human, unabashedly, unapologetically human. One life to one life. One candle to another's anxious wick. That is, until one parent with a grievance reported my story as inappropriate. I was rewarded with a memo in my file. I accepted that I wouldn't tell that story anymore or stand on desk, regardless of state of dress. Yet, there's something profound about the metaphorical return to the womb. You know, being naked in nature. Perhaps our discomfort with nudity stems from Puritanism or the story of Adam and Eve, the fig leaf. We can witness mountains of violence, and yet natural nudity on a summit remains a no-no. In fact, years later, I realized there was a real spiritual connection there on Black Elk Peak. The granite is considered sacred to Native peoples, especially the Sioux tribe. This is where Black Elk, as a child, had a vision. Several years after, as an adult, he recounted publicly the vision he saw, evolving into a respected elder and shaman. There's a connection here. Just like I recount the vision. Anyway, it's weird, this editing process, this blending of youth and age, my journal back then and me being 55 now, and it's the same voice but different, as some sort of like parallax, a displacement or difference in my position now being viewed along two currents, one of age and memory now, and one of youth and future time then. What is the worth and distance of such a measure? Well, I don't know. That's why it's a rhetorical question. Anyway, a few months ago at Iron Hill Brewery, I ran into Mike, who now has 3 kids. His kids were there. Oh my God, this is Mr. Bowne. Everyone, Mr. Bowne. Like, so many seem to recall those memories and those stories. We talked, and we were both shocked at how much we recalled from 23 years ago when he was in freshman honors English in 1999. It was at the same brewery with my dear buddy Dan that I discussed the troubles at school. You know, you, did you really need to say you were naked? But it was the truth. But would the lesson of the transparent eyeball still make an impact if you just left out that detail? Listen, how would you feel if you were 16 and one of our teachers did that? Like they were the coolest person alive. Okay, now, yes, but then I conceded that such stories, especially in this age, 2023, 2024, 2025, may not be the most politically correct. But how can I be transparent with clothes on? Was my ego still the thing that mattered? Hadn't I released it into the mountain or into the universal being? I don't think I did. And it's the shock value that drives the point home, right? Like Swift's modest proposal of eating Catholic babies to cure the Ireland famine. In that last year, akin to John Keating and Dead Poets Society, I realized, like Icarus, perhaps I flew too high to the sun or had the sun come too close to Earth. As administrators say, you gotta protect yourself. Yes, and so I did. I retired. As so many of us are now retiring, have had enough of soulless worksheets, and when parental rights mean 130 different views of what education means, the no man's land between indoctrination and individuality. Great public speakers tell stories. A good priest, a good minister, a good rabbi, they tell stories. The stories help illustrate and humanize what seems difficult. They make it applicable, especially when you're 16 or 17 in class with no idea where you're going, with lots of people telling you what you should do, and you're just really clueless. I tell them, you know what? You don't need to focus solely on SAT scores and grades. That's what society tells you. No employer is ever going to ask you what your grade is in English. Your skills, however, well, yeah, they matter, and there's more to life than skills and money, man. There's experience. Standing naked on that South Dakota summit in 1988, I couldn't have known how that moment would come to represent both the pinnacle and the problem of my teaching philosophy. We'll call this a paradox. Or ironic, or something like that. I don't know. What do I know? I'm an English teacher. Just as I shed my clothing to fully experience transcendence, I've always believed education requires a similar stripping away of pretense, of superficial metrics, of the barriers between authentic human experience and academic content. Reflections on teaching, creativity, and professional boundaries. Looking back on this 2 years later, now retired, but so not retired, I actually earn more money now, according to taxes, but I've come to realize that storytelling is very important. But I also need to understand my audience and my role as a teacher and educator. This sometimes interferes with the adult in me that is the entertainer, the storyteller, the comedian. Am I there to get jokes and laughs, or is it just about me? Or am I there to educate? Well, it's a balancing act. I've done the story in college, but I did not talk about being naked, even though the students were 19. It's still a situation where I'm a 55-year-old dude with 19-year-olds, and there are still things I check with myself. I remind myself that even though it's college now, I still have to be the adult and convey lessons. Just last fall, in the college classroom of freshmen, I traded places with every student, where they were the professor, and I sat where they were sitting as a student. And I was a very bad student. I was on my phone. I had my feet up. I was just so disruptive. I also created numerous personas on the spot. I love improv. Each with a different challenge. It made a huge impact. With the students like, this is ridiculous. I'm trying to teach, and this kid is like hijacking the class. But the comedian in me couldn't resist when a very wonderfully bright student asked what I was looking on my phone. Porn, I said. The class roared. Better than this boring lecture. Then she sassed me back, and I said with snark, okay, Professor Biatch, step back. More roars. I immediately realized, well, maybe I shouldn't call a student Professor Bitch. That crossed the line. But I used it to show chauvinism, sexism, treating women like they're bossy versus men, assertive. One's positive, one's negative. And the end of the class, with all the struggling writers, the last class of the year in December, I got at least 8 hugs. Actual hugs from students. And I never hugged a teacher. So That's not true. I think I did hug Professor Wolf. Anyway, I think I may cry now. Wait, sorry. Let me get a tissue. No, my sleeve works. I made sure to tell her, this very bright student who I called a biatch, that I was role playing a true idiot. But can students differentiate between teacher role and actor role? No. Therein lies the issue. She laughed. No, Professor Bowne, no worries. It was hilarious watching you, and I felt like it was what it was like to be everyone on their phone and not listening. It must be really frustrating for you. I'm like, it is. It is. Right? And at the same time, it's challenging because I have very severe ADHD, which I'm on medication and therapy for. It's gotten worse as I've gotten older, but I've also composed 600 essays and stories in the last 3 years and I have 2 books out and 8 more in the works ready to go. And the creative side is just an avalanche. It's unleashed, and it's really hard to contain that kind of creativity and mindset as a teacher in the classroom. It's like having 5 different Ferraris going 200 miles an hour in different directions. I just read that, and that's a great book I just read, ADHD 2.0 or something. Anyway, as teachers, we make more decisions in a day than any other job, even air traffic controllers, and they make a ton. And it's difficult to keep that creativity caged, especially when it emerges spontaneously. For example, during improv games with 6th graders, I jump in to show them how to do yes and exercises. One 6th grader was on the ground pretending to have a tantrum because she wanted gummy bears. So I pretended to be a traveling salesman with a truckload of gummy bears trying to unload them. I started pretending to dump them on her. It was funny. The class was roaring, right? This was during indoor lunch recess. But then she continued acting out, turning worse when I said, "Oh my goodness, those gummies were contaminated with a zombie virus." When I'm doing that, it's humorous. And if it's on stage, the class laughs. But I still have to realize that, hey, I'm the adult. And, there's boundaries. I've always had difficulty with boundaries. I don't know if it's me or most people do. I don't know. But it's probably better being in college now and finding other avenues like writing, doing these lectures, doing these things, doing readings, open mic nights, where I can be both the adult and hey, Walter Bowne, down with Bowne, comedian, without landing in too much trouble. It's challenging with my natural inclinations. Right. I'm just Walter Bowne, that's all, just natural. And I have these what's called really bad bicycle brakes when you have a Ferrari and you have bad bicycle brakes. But I think they're like Flintstone brakes with my feet. I think about how hard it's to stop with your feet when you're driving a Ferrari. Anyway, the classroom, like Elk's Peak, can be a place where mean egotism vanishes, where students glimpse something greater than themselves. Perhaps what my administrators couldn't understand was that my transparent eyeball wasn't just a lesson about Emerson or these parents, right? But it was about education itself. That true learning happens when we stand exposed to wonder, unmediated by artifice. I don't know if my mom, sister, or brother realized my transformation upon return from the peak, and maybe I'm putting more onto it than I realize. But it did stand out. It's those lessons, right? Those lessons not only from the past, like Emerson, but experiencing them in the now. It's feeling them, applying them, and then living the best damn life possible. Cheers, everyone.